Screen near you soon. 3 more roles, all very different, as the title character in a new ITV black comedy drama called Finding Alice, as an intolerant mother of a young gay man in the early 1980s in Russell T Davies's new series It's a Sin, and in To Olivia as Hollywood actress Patricia Neal, who was married to a struggling depressive author called Roald Dahl. All different roles, and yet all women living under various forms of domestic pressure. When we spoke, I asked Keeley Hawes about the factors that help her decide whether to take on a new role these days, given her success. We started with Finding Alice.
I was part of the team that created the show. So I have got to the point where I'm sort of, it's a very luxurious position to be in, but I am able to, have a voice in this, for example. But, I'm so lucky, and I continue to be, and I'm very grateful for that it's the writing, and I'm so lucky to be sent scripts by writers like Russell T Davies. That is the dream, really. And the exciting thing about my job, and it continues to be really exciting to me, is that I don't know from one day to the next what might come through the door. So it could be sci-fi, it could be something like To Olivia, which is a story I knew nothing about Roald Dahl and his wife. So that's what's exciting about it.
In Finding Alice, you play a woman whose husband, a property developer who's built a so-called smart house for the family, he's found dead at the bottom of the stairs right at the beginning. A mystery drama, but a strange tone, darkly comic, which slightly, I think, probably will throw some of the viewers.
Well, I think that's the thing, isn't it, about death and grief, is that it throws people. It's incredibly discombobulating to suddenly find yourself in that position, particularly when someone dies suddenly. And I think that was partly the tone that we were going for. So I'm glad that's worked, because it is such an odd thing, grief, and something that we also worked hard on was people's reactions to it and to the person who is grieving, the strange things that people say because they feel awkward and uncomfortable, and they want to say the right thing, and quite often it comes out as very much the wrong thing.
Yes, inappropriate, really unintentional inappropriate humour.
Yeah, of course, and part of what we wanted to achieve was finding the light, because there is a funny side to death. Not always, but quite often there are elements of humour that come out within those situations.
My cards have just been refused.
Okay, let's see what we can do. Checking your account, I'm afraid that you're up to your overdraft limit.
Well, I'll need to access my husband's account then.
Sadly, that's not allowed. He'd have to call back himself. And
he died last night.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Does that make a difference?
Sorry. No.
Your emotions, everything is heightened, and laughing, as we know, is very close emotionally to crying.
And you shot the production this year. How did the lockdowns and COVID safety on set, I guess, affect the production?
Gosh, we started shooting, I think, this week last year, and then we, like everybody else, came to an abrupt halt in March, and we still had 5 weeks left to shoot. So many conversations went on through lockdown, in terms of COVID protocols, insurance, all of those things, just trying to make sure, like everybody else in the industry, that we were going to go back and take our cast and crew back into an environment in which they would be safe and be kept safe and well. So by the time we went back a couple of months ago, we went back to shoot the last 5 weeks, and it was slightly easier because we had shot everything we needed to shoot in the studio. So we were actually out on location, which, as we now know, is it's better to be outside. But we did have sort of 4 cast members who are 70 plus, that we were having to be especially careful with, of course, as well as, the safety of everybody else. So,
of course, yeah.
COVID protocols were in place, and it was brilliant. There was a real sense that every one of us was really pleased to be back.
But having to pick up where you left off a long time earlier, though.
So we couldn't put on any lockdown weight. It was tricky. I mean, it was tricky for continuity, tricky for the hair and makeup department, for the costume department, but we got there and we did it. And we have had to do all sorts of things. We've CGI'd people in. We've, I had a scene where I had to be a little bit intimate with another character, and his wife, the actor's wife, came in, and we put a wig on her and a costume identical to mine, and so she stepped in for that moment, and it was things like
Really?
that.
Wow.
You just had to start thinking outside of the box how we can make this work and not have
COVID-enforced body double. Then that's a first
on the production, because you just don't want any of that to impact on the story. You don't want to be able to see it. So it was quite interesting, but it felt like a huge achievement.
And yet, despite all these restrictions, we're getting a Keeley Hawes triple whammy on screen in the next few weeks. Just tell us about It's a Sin as well. Russell T Davies series charting the lives. She's a very difficult character, isn't she? I mean, was she difficult to play?
There's always fun to be had with a character like that. She's not likeable on the page. I didn't particularly like Valerie, but I do have huge sympathy for her. We're talking about the 80s, for a start. It was a very different time. But actually, of course, It's a Sin has parallels. That the start of the AIDS epidemic is there are so many parallels within this show to what is happening now, with COVID-19.
There are boys dying all over the world, but no one knows anything.
Do you seriously think there's an illness that only kills gay men? I don't believe it! Now hit me with those lasers, please!
Went into hospital, ambulance.
Shame on you!
He loved your son. What's wrong with that?
Do you think I should have known?
It's quite extraordinary. I watched it the other day, and again I was just taken aback. The way that people were treated, just has real similarities to what's been going on, certainly at the start of what's been happening in March here.
And she's in denial. She's a woman in denial, really, isn't she? And do you see a parallel there in terms of people who are not facing this current COVID crisis in the way that
yes,
that possibly they should be?
And she's in denial, I think, for all sorts of reasons. She doesn't know her son is gay. That alone is a huge shock to Valerie. So, and I'm trying not to be too spoilery. It's tricky to talk about all of that without spoiling it for people. But she's very much a woman of her time.
And there's another domestic crisis being played out in To Olivia, a domestic tragedy. You're playing Hollywood actress Patricia Neal, married to Roald Dahl, and their daughter Olivia died suddenly in 1962, encephalitis caused by measles. How much did you know, if anything, about Patricia Neal?
I didn't know really anything. The first I learned of it was when I read the script. We all know Roald Dahl, or Roald as she calls him, which
yes.
is a Norwegian pronunciation. I would like to point out, I haven't just got it wrong. That is what she called him. And so, yes, their 30-year marriage was so full of, just drama and tragedy. And, she suffered a series of strokes at one point when she was pregnant. She had to learn how to walk and talk again, and Roald Dahl was a big part of her rehabilitation. But we concentrate on this period of time where they lose their daughter, and so hence the title To Olivia. It is a sort of love letter to Olivia.
It's not just you who's lost Livy. You have to fix it before it's so broken that it can't be fixed anymore.
She'd all but retired from the screen at this time, having been a star. This is a real character on which you can base this performance. Did you also study her?
She was a hugely successful and hugely respected Broadway actress. And then she was asked to play this supporting role in Hud, for which she won an Oscar. It's another part of their amazing story. So yes, they are living in Gypsy House, and this Hollywood star is living with Roald Dahl in the English countryside. So it's a real look behind the curtain at their relationship of Roald and Patricia, rather than impersonation.
And as you say, just finally, a range of roles that she was playing on screen, given that we have these three roles that you're playing within the space of a few weeks. If you think about Alice and Valerie and Patricia, which was the most satisfying of those three to play?
Oh gosh, well, they were all incredibly satisfying. I mean, all the themes that they all cover, life and death and relationships, they're all so human and so much fun to be had in so many of them. Certainly, Alice, there's Finding Alice, there's a lot of humour there. And It's a Sin, is very funny as well as being, desperately heartbreaking. So each of them actually had their own. I loved working on all of them.
Keeley Hawes, Finding Alice begins on ITV on Sunday at 9:00. It's a Sin begins on Channel 4 next Friday. You'll have to wait a little while for To Olivia, which is released on the 19th.